Everybody. This is Pramod Nair of the Department of English, the University of Hyderabad, and we continue our studies in posthumanism. Today's lesson will focus on companion species and multi-species. Just to refresh your mind, we acknowledge that humans are made up of several other life forms. We evolve with and are dependent upon several other life forms. For posthumanism, therefore, there is no such thing as a completely autonomous, completely sealed off, coherent, self contained human. We have evolved with other creatures. We live because of and with other creatures. Or, as Donna Haraway and others following her have proposed, we become with other creatures. The term companion species was initially coined by Donna Haraway, and the idea was to describe the mutually dependent relationship between humans and the non human species. And Haraway illustrates this in quasi autobiographical fashion, talking about her relationship with her dog. And pays attention to the fact that the dog human relationship is a very special kind of relationship. But historically, too, humans have co evolved with several other creatures, and we can think in terms of domestication of animals, animals used for war, animals used for various purposes, utilitarian in perspective, of course, but it's also important to note that just as we have shaped the ecosystems of animals, the animals have shaped human ecosystems, whether it is in the form of guide dogs and seeing eye dogs, dogs and cats and other creatures as pets, or even in some cases, the zoological parks and reserves, which are, of course, disputable in the sense animal rights people have considerable problems with assuming that you can construct a wildness or a wilderness in the heart of a city in the form of zoos and sanctuaries. But that's a different debate altogether. For now, the relationship of humans with the non-humans enables us to observe that we shape each other. The animal shapes the human shapes the animal. Haraway observed, and as we know from the work of biologists such as Lynn Margulis and several others working now, humans live with and depend upon multiple kinds of microorganisms. The microorganisms, for example, that live in our digestive canal, which help us digest our food, are what make us live. They construct our physiological processes so that we can live, we can survive. So we depend on microorganisms for survival, and the microorganisms in turn gain something from being associated with the humans. In fact, as you know, several bacteria cannot live outside the host body. In many cases, we are the host body, but other animals as well can serve as hosts, which goes on to say that there are no discrete units of life. You cannot think of life as packaged units living by themselves, sealed off from the world. You have to reconsider what we understand as life by visualizing life as constantly in relationship with, dependent upon other life forms. And these need not necessarily be other humans. They can be, like I said, animals, domesticated animals, agricultural animals, and various kinds of animals for different purposes. But you can also think, or you ought to think of life as dependent upon things that we don't see, we don't take cognition of, such as microbes. Increasingly, as people like Jamie Lorimer have noted, we in the modern age have become very antiseptic and antibiotic. which means we have been so focused on hygiene, we have been so focused on cleaning every surface of possible microbes that even the essential microbes have been lost. This is an argument he has made in his new book, The Probiotic Planet. And he says, we have forgotten what it is to live with microbes. And several of those microbes are essential to us, as any biologist, as any medical doctor will tell us. So life forms coexist. And as humans, we need to reevaluate what we understand as species boundaries. More importantly, and perhaps more disturbingly, we should rethink our concepts, our notions of the self. And the argument that posthumanists make via discoveries in biology and in the philosophy of biology is that our self is constituted by the non-human. That is, the human evolves, becomes with, grows, if you want, with the non-human within us. So what is the human self? What can we think of as a self that I possess or you possess? Are we single, autonomous selves, or are we many? Along with companion species, there are other terms that are frequently used and which you will encounter when you read materials in posthumanist studies. That includes terminology like terms like interspecies, cross-species sociality, nature cultures, and what has been called plural relating. We will get through some of these concepts and ideas as we go along. I'll first look at something that has developed in the last 2 or 2.5 decades, and that is multi-species ethnography. The aim is to pay attention to how whatever world we are talking about, that world is built by humans with other humans. So, multi-species ethnographers like Anat Singh note that humans and other beings co-build worlds. So, Anat Singh's brilliant study, The Mushroom at the End of the World, is about this kind of multi-species ethnography. The mole, the rabbit, the potato, she says, are not just tools or blocks for human projects, but they make worlds of their own. This is a major shift in thinking, because you see, we traditionally think of these as available to us. They're there for humans to utilize, humans to cook or eat or play with or whatever it might be. We don't think of, say, the potato or the mushroom as doing world buildings on their own, because for our rather arrogant notional purposes, we build worlds, as humans build worlds. But 2 points to be kept in mind. Our worlds are not built just by us. Our worlds are co-built by other creatures, plants, microbes, animals, all sorts of things. So, essentially, Anna Singh looking at mushrooms and several later people looking at vegetal life note the fact that world building is actually world co-building. And whether you take the beaver that builds large dams, whether it is birds that build nests, or whether it is grass and other rhizomatic creatures that build vast networks of plant growth. This could be grass, this could be mushroom, any of those. We are looking at worlds. They are worlds. And if you read a novel like Richard Powers' The Overstory, there are passages there that show that trees that collapse, that fall dead, are not actually dead. They fall, as in they are broken, but from the detritus, from the body, the trunk, the leaves of the tree, you find other organisms growing. So even the supposed dead wood is not really dead because it provides the basis for the sustaining of life, which means other forms of life grow depend upon this so-called dead wood. So this is world making too. And here you can see two quotations from the novel I just mentioned, Richard Powers' The Overstory. Trees know when we are close to. The chemistry of their roots and the perfumes their leaves pump out change when we are near. When you feel good after a walk in the woods, it may be certain species are bribing you. And then later, when the lateral roots of two Douglas firs, one kind of tree common to the North American continents, when the lateral roots of two Douglas firs run into each other underground, they fuse. Those self-grafted knots, the two trees, join the vascular system together and become one. Networked underground by countless thousands of miles of living fungal threads, where trees feed and heal each other, keep their young and sick alive, pool their resources. There are no individuals. There aren't even separate species. Everything in the forest is the forest. What do you think Richard Powers is saying here? He's saying, note how the roots of one tree are connected to roots of several other trees, forming a gigantic network that spreads across huge areas of ground. On the surface, you see one large tree and you say, oh, one tree. But its roots are going deep down and going laterally. So the tree roots go this way and they grow this way, which means the roots of one tree merge, fuse with several other roots. Is it one tree or is it many? Is it just a solitary tree with its roots going deep down and its trunk going straight up? Or is the tree networked? Is the tree connected to others? The second point, which is there in the first quote that you saw on your screen, is that when trees sense something approaching, they transmit a certain chemical which other trees pick up, which means the trees communicate. Vegetal communication, as it's called, that is plant communication as it's called, refers to the collective agency, the collective ability of plants to respond to their environment. And that response shapes the environment in a way that humans do not understand. Which is why the example that I quoted for you, that once you have walked out of your concrete jungle into the forest or into the park, why do you feel better? What gives you a little bit of enthusiasm? Maybe, says Richard Powers, it is what chemicals the trees have transmitted and which you have absorbed. Maybe that makes you feel better. That's one part. The other is what I just read out, vegetal communications. That plants do communicate. And that's why the first quotation there, if the trees in the front of the forest encounter something, they let out a chemical so that the trees at the end of the forest, so there are trees here, and the message is transmitted from the front of the forest to the rear of the forest through some form of communication, some form of transmitted messages. This is vegetal communication. And vegetal communication is seen as an index of collective rather than individual agency, that they work together. They work as a unit, as a team. One tree receives a message, transmit to the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and it goes. Now, we have always, as in humans, have always believed that humans communicate, animals communicate, that we know, right? The whale song, the music of the bees and the birds that make different kinds of calls for mating of food or rearing of the young and so on and so forth. But you not thought that plants communicate. More and more people looking, especially in critical plant studies, have proposed that animals do communicate. Humans have not paid much attention, much heed to those. Multi-species ethnography, then, as you have just seen, is a variant of traditional ethnography, but also of cultural geography. Multi-species ethnography accounts for what Donna Haraway and others have called entangled lives. It proposes that human, non-human living forms in any territory are mutually influential. They interact with each other and are mutually influential. And this is not just about the human, non-human. Landscapes and their material elements, air, water, soil, also interact, which is effectively to say that the dichotomy of nature and culture is no longer valid because man-made culture cannot be separated from other life forms, the ecosystem, the environment. Human culture has always been co-evolving with nature, and nature is affected by what humans have built, which means to say that when we say human culture and when we say nature, as though they're two entirely distinct things. And we know that right from the English Romantic poets downwards, we have seen nature as something pure, pristine, which should not be contaminated, which should not be polluted. And then there is, of course, human culture, the city. And if you read through any of the Wordsworth poems, upon Westminster Bridge and Daffodils and all that, Wordsworth is going on about how nature is good, is pure, is lovely, is untouched, and we should keep it that way. Because humanity, when it gets into nature, pollutes it, contaminates it, and human culture is bad. So, as he would say in Upon Westminster Bridge and his London poems, the great heart of London lies still. And then you look at the Blake poem about the chartered streets of London in the famous poem London. The city is seen as an embodiment of human culture, but polluted, contaminated, dirty, etc. And nature is pure. No, nature is not pure. Nature is a part of what we are, and we are a part of what nature is. Hence, Donna Haraway uses the term nature cultures. That you cannot separate nature from what we are. We have partaken of it. We have grown with it. We absorbed it. We have also modified it. So nature modifies us. We modify nature. It's not possible, says Haraway and for her followers, including Rosie Braidotti, Cecilia Esberg, and Francisca Ferrander, all the big names in posthumanist studies, that we cannot think of nature and culture as distinct, clearly marked boundary conditions in which they function separately. No. We need to think of them as nature cultures, one word. And it's nature culture is written now as one word. Because it's a part of what we are. It's a part of who we are. And it's a part of how we become what we become. You cannot separate them. Then, if we say that we are a part of nature, we also need to account for the fact that humans and non-humans share vulnerabilities. Our embodiment is in a particular context. Our growth, our lives, our death, they are all part of larger conditions. So shared vulnerabilities is the recognition that humans and non-humans possess the same conditions of injurability. That the minute we speak of having a body, it means the body is open to injury. This fact of having a body open to injury being common leads Stacey Alaimo to coin the term transcorporeality, that humans and the non-humans are both open to injury, are both open to harm, because the grasshopper, the eagle, the whale, the human, all have one common, one underlying connection. We have material bodies. we have bodies that can be very definitely injured. We have injurable bodies. So shared vulnerability is central to the understanding of cross species, interspecies, or any of those terms that I have outlined for you. So Stacey Alaimo argues that transcorporeality is the opposite of distancing or dividing the human from external nature. It implies that we are literally enmeshed in the physical material world. We have bodies which are placed in the material world. And you cannot think of these as separate. Our body, their body. Which means also that the human and the non-human are caught up in the same networks of power, which make some humans become slaves, cause them to become slaves, or are sold as commodities, and that occurs in the lives of plants and animals as well. So, structural inequality will determine the fate of individual species and of very specific race or ethnicity among humans. Which is to say, depending on your race, your ethnicity, or your species, you can be killed, injured, sold, owned, whatever it might be. So if you think very carefully about this, factors like climate change, global warming, deforestation, toxic dumping, damage the ecosystem, but for both human and the non-human. You would have seen pictures of birds covered in oil, of the poorer parts of the world in the global south, living in completely unacceptable conditions of filth and pollution. Now, if you think about this, both the human and the non-human are affected, and affected adversely by things like toxic dumping, nuclear tests, or whatever else you can think of as an example of the history of pollution. They affect the humans and the non-humans differentially. They affect different kinds of humans differentially. So the upper classes, the wealthy, who can afford to air condition their houses, seal themselves inside bunkers, will be affected, but are still relatively safer as compared to, say, the poorer people who live on the roadsides, who live in slums, who have very little protection. Toxins enter the bodies of animals and humans, and different kinds of humans, and they affect them differently. And more artists now are drawing attention to multi-species recognitions of multi-species, attention to things like co-becoming in projects like CMD experiments in bioalgorithmic politics and the microbiocene. And these projects, as critics have noted, highlight communication across species and envision the humans as part of a larger ecosystem or ecology. They demonstrate how a collaboration is really speaking possible. Another kind of multi-species community is also visible in the late 20th century. If you look at water and the waste, the quantum of waste in water, people like Astrida Neymanis, who work in what is called the blue or oceanic humanities, have noted how there are very severe, very serious consequences to, say, the presence of plastics in all parts of the world, in all kinds of water bodies, except that the water bodies enter us. They enter animals, or they enter animals and plants, and from there enter us, which means to say that we share vulnerability with them too. So cross-species or multi-species and interspecies belonging is a crucial part of posthumanism for the simple reason that it points to not just shared lives, but also shared vulnerabilities. Thank you.